Hello, everyone. My name is Chris with Wisconsin Facets, and I would like to welcome you to today's Compassion Resilience Self-Care Snapshot series with today's webinar on wellness strategies. Our presenter today is Emily Jonesberg. She is the training lead with Rogers in Health, the Education and Advocacy Department of Rogers Behavioral Health, and a proud mom of an active toddler. In her role at Rogers, she facilitates trainings for leaders in the nonprofit, education, and healthcare sectors. Emily also facilitates programming for staff at Rogers Behavioral Health and with parents in the community. Prior to her work at Rogers, Emily worked in a youth serving capacity for over 13 years through various nonprofits and school districts. During this time, she also developed and delivered equity training with adults and youth. Emily has a master's of social work and is a licensed clinical social worker. And with that, welcome, Emily.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be with you all here today. Thanks for joining me. As Chris mentioned, I am going to be focusing on wellness strategies for our self-care snapshot this month. Before I jump into that content, as always, I like to start with a moment just to pause. And this is actually a good fit also for a wellness strategy. Oftentimes, pauses, they help us recenter ourselves. They help us calm our mind and refocus on the moment and what is most important in that given moment. They really give us this chance to be more proactive and intentional in our responses and less reactive. So as you can tell, it can be a very nice wellness strategy to care for ourselves, but also help us be and show up as our best selves for others around us. So we're just going to take a moment to practice that pause. I invite you to get into a comfortable position. For me, that's putting both feet on the ground, and I have my back erect just off a little away from the back of the chair. And then I encourage you to at least take your eyes off the screen. If you are comfortable to close them, feel free to do so. And now bring your attention to your breath. Typically, this is most apparent in our nose, chest, or stomach. Just bring your attention to how you're breathing and attune to it with a certain level of curiosity. And if your mind starts to wander, don't worry. That's totally fine. Just gently bring it back to that focus on the sensation of breathing. No judgment of where it's going, just a reminder to bring it back. Notice how your breath is nourishing yourself and your body, oftentimes without you even paying attention to it. Let yourself feel your whole body breathe, gently moving with the rise and fall of your breath. I want you to focus on that sensation for at least 2 breath cycles here. Now release your breath and allow everything that comes into awareness to just be the way it is. And bring your focus back to your screen and to our time together. If you're anything like me, you may have even felt your body relax as you did that exercise. You became more attuned to your body and to the things around you that are happening in the moment. And that's exactly what that moment of pause can do for us. Something that we can use and tap into throughout our day. We could take a large chunk of time to practice the pause, or we could take all of 1 breath or 2 breaths, oftentimes doing it without others even knowing it. So not only a chance for us to center into our presentation, but already a self-care strategy for you to take into mind as you think of your own wellness. As with all of our self-care snapshots, we're going to be building on skills that contribute to building and developing our compassion resilience muscles, as I like to think of it. And the definition I use for compassion resilience, it's really this power to return to a place of empathy, strength, and hope after witnessing of the challenges others face in our community and ourselves. I like to think of it as the baseline for all humans, this place of empathy, strength, and hope. But when we witness all the junk around us in the world, we experience it ourselves, or we support other people who are experiencing it, we get pulled away from that baseline. So as we're building up these muscles, it's helping us return back to that baseline quicker and quicker. And it's helping us remain optimistic in our imperfect world. We are in our July series of our snapshots. We've already done, I think we're on our 7th now here, so lots of work prior to July. If you haven't seen any of those other snapshot series, you are welcome to go on the Wisconsin Facet website and register for them at any point, and then they send you the pre-recorded webinar that's happened prior to July. Encourage you to do that if any of those topics stand out to you and you haven't gotten a chance to see them. And then we have one more remaining after today's session. We'll be closing it out with connecting to our purpose in the beginning of August. All of the content pulled for the snapshot is from the Compassion Resilience Toolkit, which can be found on compassionresiliencetoolkit.org. And that is a resource that's been compiled through Rogers InHealth, but with the support of WISE, the Wisconsin Initiative for Stigma Elimination, and with various community partners across the state of Wisconsin and beyond. So really just a great resource in general for you to check out if you haven't. It's free. After you click on the third resource, you will be asked to create an account just so we get a sense of who's accessing the toolkit, but it remains free and accessible to all. Today, as you see, we're going to be focusing on these wellness strategies. And this we do with a very holistic look. And we find it particularly helpful as it's a necessary tool in order to combat compassion fatigue, which is something that we dug into, or my colleague dug into in more depth in the January session around these different stages that you'll see in the slide now. We like to think of a certain level of self-awareness being able to come to us when we spend a moment just looking at compassion fatigue. And then all the strategies that we've talked about are really about, once we realize where we're at, how we can best support ourselves in getting out of this cycle, or support others that we are there to support to help them get out of this place of compassion fatigue. So you'll notice today, similarly with our wellness strategies, if you take a glance at this cycle right now and you say, you know, I kind of feel like right now in this moment, I'm in the irritability stage or the zombie stage, or maybe you're feeling quite balanced and you're in the renewal. All of these things we'll talk about could help either reinforce that feeling of renewal or hopefully pull you a little bit further away from that other stage of compassion fatigue that you may be experiencing. As a reminder, it is completely normal for us as humans to experience compassion fatigue. It's part of existing, particularly when we're there to help and support others, whether they're our family members, as a parent or caregiver, or perhaps in the professional world, or even as a volunteer. It's going to be common that we experience some of these things, and it's just about being aware of where we're at so we can help ourselves move to a place that feels a bit more balanced. So self-care, care for the self in our wellness strategies. I like to start with this quote from Tammy Foreman. Self-care is not an indulgence. Self-care is a discipline. It requires tough-mindedness, a deep and personal understanding of your priorities, and a respect for both yourself and the people you choose to spend your life with. I really appreciate this because it's a reminder of just how challenging at times caring for ourselves can be, and yet how incredibly important it is. Not just for us to feel well and be our best selves, but then for us to show up as our best selves to anybody we choose to be around. And so that they're really getting where we want them to get out of us. Oftentimes in our culture, we don't do a great job prioritizing this or letting people spend time for themselves. and it has a negative impact as a result. It leaves us in a place of compassion fatigue oftentimes, and then that negatively impacts our ability to show up in a compassionate way to those around us. These are pulled from sections 8 through 11 and that toolkit I mentioned earlier. If you do want to dig into any more of this with more detail, please do so. We pull from the work of Scott and Holly Stoner from the Samaritan Wellness Foundation. They have a very holistic look at wellness and use this wellness compass as a visual to help us think about all the different components included in a holistic sense of caring for the self. So you'll see we have heart with relationships and emotions underneath, spirit, core values, rest and play, strength, care for body, stress resilience, and mind, looking at school and work and organization. If you're interested in getting some hints or tips on things you can do to help support each one of these areas of the compass, I highly recommend you look at the assessment we have online, the link here in the slide. It's going to take you to a fillable form, and it will have a couple of various statements, roughly 10 or so per subsection of the compass, and just asking for you to reflect on which of these do you feel is going well for you right now, which ones are not, and maybe which ones aren't applicable at all, don't feel like a good fit of those statements. The idea behind doing this, if you do choose to, it's just a chance to take a step back and celebrate the things that are going well, and then think about what is maybe one or two things from that assessment that you're not doing right now, but you think could really help with your well-being, and how could you in the next week find an opportunity to prioritize it. So don't, I always like to tell people, this isn't an opportunity to further beat yourself up and negatively impact your self-care. It's taking a step back and saying, oh, I'm not doing as much as I want, but really the chance just to focus on one or two of the things that sound maybe most helpful and most fun. I'm going to take us through each one of these subsections, heart, spirit, mind, and strength, and do just a really quick exercise around each one of these, just to give us some additional wellness strategies in our time together. Our first one is around mind. If you remember, this is that school work space, so getting the most out of educational, volunteer, and employment opportunities. I also like to think of this as being a parent, as a mother, though I know it's not all work. There's certainly enjoyment, but there's pieces of it that I think fit out of where do I get the most out of being a parent, would fit in some ways in the mind section. And then also organization, how I manage time, priorities, money, and belongings. And the one activity I'm going to pull from for this mind section is called the appreciative inquiry reflection on competence. A lot of words for essentially saying we're going to pause and take a moment to think of things that you're doing well, that you value about yourself. Similar to a lot of our self-care snapshot series, this is an interactive experience. So I highly recommend, if you've got a piece of paper nearby, to grab that and a pen, or open up a Word document if you're on your computer, and just take this moment to reflect on some of the things that I present in our remaining activities here. So for this one, I want you to consider for a moment the things you value deeply. And I want you to focus on some key areas. This first one may be the hardest, but what do you value the most about yourself? And I'm going to pause and let you think up a couple ideas to jot down. Take a step back and think, what are some things, I truly value about myself? Now I want you to think of what are some things you value about how you fulfill your role as a caregiver. So for me, how I value my role as a mom. I could also consider it, though, as how I value my role as an aunt. I used to, as was mentioned in my bio, work a lot with young people prior to my current role. So I would also say how I value the way in which I'm a caregiver for all of the youth that I've supported. So whatever caregiver means to you, what do you value about how you fulfill your role? as a caregiver. And then our final category for this one, what is something you value about your family? And I bring this last one in because if it's your family, then that means you're part of it and you had a part in creating whatever this thing is that you value about your family. So these are 3 different pieces of your identity. Perhaps there's some overlap between things that you value, but this is just a chance as we take a step back and look at what things we get, what we get the most out of in our volunteer, family, work responsibilities, for example, just taking a moment to really honor the things that we value about ourselves in those spaces can be a wellness strategy in and of itself, and one that we oftentimes forget about. Take time to celebrate yourself and not be humble in this part of the exercise, but let yourself brag about yourself for a few minutes. My next wellness strategy is going to be pulling on the spirit section. This is looking at core values and rest and play. So what things are most important to us that inform that personal mission and supports our sense of meaning and purpose in the work that we do. And then also, how do we balance the world of work and play? And again, work being, it could be if you're a stay-at-home parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, and you're caring for little ones all day long, definitely considered work. How do you find balance between that and play to help renew yourself? You may remember this from if you watched a previous Snapshot series here where we did this exercise, but I wanted to pull it back up. This is just taking a moment to reflect on, when do you feel most alive, most like yourself? What are you doing? Who are you with? What kind of setting are you in? I'm going to pause and just have you jot that down real quick. This may bring to mind something that you truly value, something that's important to you. And it may also bring to mind something that you may need to remember to find balance in. So for example, one of the things that makes me feel most alive is being out in nature, particularly ideally out in a setting with mountains and very few people, if any, around, though I would probably be with some close loved ones as I'm out hiking and walking in nature. It shows that one of my values is definitely being outside and being in nature. And it's a great opportunity for me to take a step back and think about, how do I incorporate that right now into my weekly routine? Some may even go to daily routine. And that's the next thing I want you to think about, is that in the next week, let's say, how can you prioritize experiencing this thing that makes you feel most alive? And whatever it means realistically in the next week. So I am, like many of you, in the state of Wisconsin. So getting to the mountains is probably going to be challenging the next week, but I can certainly find an opportunity to be outside and amongst trees and in nature. So that would be something that I could look to prioritize. For our next section, this is looking at strength. So this is stress resilience and care for my body. Stress resilience is about how we deal positively with the challenges of our life, and I'm going to dig into that in a moment. And then obviously care for my body is oftentimes what's thought of as the stereotypical self-care activities, things that look at healthy habits when it comes to physical well-being, eating, sleeping, exercising, movement, that kind of stuff. But for stress resilience, there's a really interesting TED Talk available by Dr. Kelly McGonigal called Make Stress Your Friend. And in that TED Talk, she talks about this recent research that's really looking at stress and how even herself in her professional career came from a space of advising people on how to stay away from stress, how it added to negative contributions on their physical health. It reduced their even life expectancy and their enjoyment of life. And so she did a lot of coaching on helping people think about how to avoid stress. And then some new research came out that shows that actually, when you talk about stress as an opportunity and as a growth chance for growing and challenging yourself, that it can have a positive impact on yourself or neutral. And so looking at this analysis, it showed that those who believed that had high levels of stress in their life and believed that that was negatively going to impact their physical health did indeed see a negative impact on their health. Those who had high rates of stress and saw the stress as a growth opportunity, as a chance to challenge themselves, did not see a negative impact on their physical health. So it was really all in their perception of stress and essentially their stress resilience that contributed to negative physical health outcomes or not, which really was interesting to hear, and I'm sure doesn't apply to every situation of stress out there, but it does highlight the way in which we interpret things in our life makes a big difference. And so this exercise that I'm going to walk us through next is thinking about stress and how we respond to it, and perhaps our perspective, how we can use our perspective in a way to help us address stress a little bit differently. So again, with your jotting down here, my first thought I want you to ponder: how does your body let you know that you are experiencing stress? Are you someone like it's tense, headaches, stomach aches, hard time focusing, lack of sleep, lots of sleep? And which are you most likely to tell yourself when you realize you are experiencing stress? Do you say, I've done it again. What is wrong with me? I can't stop from feeling stressed. Really putting ourselves down. Or do you respond with, stress is a normal part of life's ups and downs. Sometimes it can even be helpful. How do we prime our body essentially to respond to the stress that we're experiencing? And what are 2 positive outcomes you have experienced as a result of feeling stressed? So if you can think of the last time you felt stressed, maybe that's even right now, what are 2 positive outcomes you could say came out of experiencing that stress? And then what responses to stress do you want to do more of to build your stress resilience? So if you think of how you normally respond to stress, what in those responses would be 1 or 2 things that you would like to build upon and do more of? So for example, I get into planning mode, very much so. I'm going to figure out how am I going to navigate the stress moving forward, something I could build upon. And on the flip side, what responses would you like to change in how you currently respond to stress? Is there any way in which you currently respond that you would like to change? For me, at times I get also a little reactive and move a bit too fast instead of taking a step back and letting myself think through all the different possible options. I move quickly to one, which may cause me to be more reactive than I would truly like to be in my response to stress. So take some time to think through this, knowing that you've got the PowerPoint slides there available for you. And just ponder, what could this look like if you continue to when you continue to experience stress in your life? How could you coach yourself through experiencing it slightly differently as it comes up? What are some things you want to build upon and some things you'd like to change? And then my final self-care wellness strategy, it pulls from the heart section. And it's covering a concept that we did a whole session on around self-compassion. But I do have a self-compassion exercise that I'd like to lead you through. And so the 2 parts of the heart section, before I get into that, is the relationships. So creating and maintaining healthy connections with others in your life. And then emotions, expressing your emotions and receiving others' emotions in a healthy way. And that's where the self-compassion piece very much comes in, really honestly, with both the way you experience your own emotions, and then that can impact the relationships that you have with others. So again, self-compassion is a chance for us to take a step back and think about how do we respond to ourselves when we're having a tough time, when we've made a mistake, we haven't met an expectation. What kind of self-talk do we do to ourselves? Do we see that we can be kind to ourselves? Do we see the common humanity that, of course, we made a mistake because we're human and all humans do? And are we mindful of all those tough emotions that come up in the moment and let them pass instead of clinging to them? So I'm going to invite you just to, again, if you're comfortable, close your eyes or take your eyes off the screen. And I want you to think about this, and then I'll have you jot down one or two things in between as well. So first, I want you to think about a time when a close friend of yours was feeling really bad about him or herself, and they were struggling in some way. How would you respond to your friend in that situation, especially when you're at your best? I want you just to take a moment to either think about or write down how you would normally respond to your friend who's going through a really tough situation. Include in that, what kind of tone do you think you would use with your friend, and perhaps even some of the words you would say. Now think about times when you feel bad about yourself or you're struggling. How do you typically respond to yourself in those situations? Again, take a moment to think about it or even write down. What kind of tone do you use with yourself? What kind of words do you say to yourself? And now think about those two responses, or if you wrote them down, take a look at the two different things that you wrote, the way you would respond to a friend and the way that you respond to yourself. Do you notice any differences? Why do you think there's differences if there are? What factors or fears come into play that lead you to treat yourself and others so differently? And then take a moment to think about or write down how you think things might change if you responded to yourself in the same way you typically respond to a close friend when you're suffering. What do you think would happen if you treated yourself just like you treated a close friend? And that wraps up our fourth quick wellness strategy for our time together in this very quick self-care snapshot, looking at wellness strategies from the Compassion Resilience Toolkit. Hopefully you get a chance to continue to ponder these things. And as I said in the beginning, I highly recommend you check out that assessment if you can and pull one or two fun things from it that you'd like to try to build up your wellness in the next week or two. I know there's a wealth of additional resources available online in the toolkit, as I mentioned earlier as well. I just want to thank you all for being with me and taking time out to be part of this webinar or to listen to it afterwards. And I hope you take care. And I'll turn over to Chris in case there's any questions.
I do not see any questions right now, but I wanted to say thank you to Emily for presenting to us today. I truly get so lost in these reflective exercises that I'm glad you let me know your ending so that I can get back to doing my duty.
That is a part of your duty. Chris, I really am glad that you participate alongside, and I hope everybody else does as well.
That's great. Thank you. And so again, a reminder to our participants that you can register for the last of our series, Connecting to Our Purpose, which is going to take place on August 9th. And you can go to Wisconsin Facet's website to do that. Thank you all for attending this training. The recording and the survey will be sent to you shortly, and we would greatly appreciate your completion of the survey. So that is it for today. Everyone have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Take care.